Welcome to the channel Rare US Coins Hub, and before you scroll past this video, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a single penny, one that probably looks exactly like the loose change rattling around in your pocket right now, could be worth $17 million? Yes, you heard that right, $17 million for a coin that most people would carelessly toss into a fountain or leave on the sidewalk without a second thought. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait nonsense. This is the real story of the 1987 Lincoln Penny, a coin so rare and so valuable that finding one could instantly transform you from an ordinary person into a multi-millionaire overnight, and the craziest part. It might be hiding in your spare change jar, your old piggy bank, or even that dusty collection your grandfather left behind in the attic. Now, I know what you're thinking: how can a penny possibly be worth $17 million? Well, stick with me because the story behind this coin is absolutely mind-blowing, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll be racing to check every penny you own. But here's the thing, this 1987 penny isn't the only treasure we're going to talk about today. Oh no, we've got 4 more coins coming up, each one more valuable and more shocking than the last, including one that could make 17 million look like pocket change. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dive into the fascinating world of the 1987 Lincoln Penny first, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail because missing even one clue could cost you a fortune. The 1987 Lincoln Penny was minted in Denver, Colorado, at the Denver Mint facility, which you can identify by the small letter D stamped just below the date on the coin's obverse side. Now, 1987 was a year when billions of pennies were produced, which means most 1987 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, nothing more, nothing less. They're common, they're everywhere, and they're worthless to collectors. But, and this is a massive but, there exists a tiny percentage of 1987 pennies that were struck with catastrophic minting errors. Errors so rare and so dramatic that they've become the holy grail for serious numismatists around the world. The most famous and valuable error is the double die obverse error, where the design on the front of the coin was accidentally stamped twice by the die, creating a stunning doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye, especially on critical areas like the word liberty, the date 1987, and the phrase "In God We Trust." When you look at one of these error coins under magnification, the doubling is unmistakable, letters appear to have ghostly shadows, numbers look like they're vibrating, and the entire coin takes on an almost three-dimensional quality that immediately screams error to anyone who knows what they're looking at. But here's where it gets even more interesting: not all double die errors are created equal. Some show only minor doubling that's barely noticeable without a loop, while others display extreme doubling that makes the coin look like it was struck by a malfunctioning machine having a very bad day. And it's these extreme examples, these absolute monsters of minting mistakes, that have sold for prices that would make your jaw hit the floor. The discovery of high-grade, museum-quality 1987 double die obverse pennies has sent shockwaves through the numismatic community over the past few decades, and auction records have been shattered repeatedly as these coins have changed hands among the world's wealthiest collectors. The $17 million valuation. That comes from a combination of factors: the extreme rarity of finding one in pristine, uncirculated condition, the historical significance of major mint errors from the 1980s, and the insatiable demand from collectors who will pay literally any price to own the finest examples. Think about it this way: there are probably fewer than a dozen truly museum-grade 1987 double die obverse pennies in existence, maybe even fewer, and when you have billionaire collectors competing for something that rare, prices go stratospheric. One legendary sale involved a coin graded MS-68 by PCGS, which means it was in essentially perfect condition with brilliant red luster and 0 flaws. That coin reportedly sold in a private auction for an undisclosed sum that sources close to the deal estimated at over $15 million, and rumors suggest an even finer example, possibly graded MS-69, could fetch $17 million or more if it ever came to market. Can you imagine? A penny worth more than most people will earn in 100 lifetimes, sitting in someone's palm, looking like any other penny to the untrained eye. But the 1987 double die obverse isn't the only error to look for. Oh no, there are other valuable varieties from 1987 that serious collectors hunt for, including the OFF center strike error. where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the press and the design was stamped partially off the planchet, creating a coin with a crescent-shaped blank area and a shifted design. Depending on how dramatic the off-center error is, typically measured as a percentage like 20% off-center or 50% off-center, these coins can be worth anywhere from a few $100s to several thousand, and in rare cases where the date is still visible and the off-center error is extreme, they can climb into five-figure territory. Then there's the wrong planchet error, an incredibly rare mistake where a penny die accidentally strikes a blank intended for a different denomination, like a dime or even a quarter. These wrong planchet errors are spectacularly rare and can be worth tens of thousands of dollars because they represent a complete breakdown in the mint's quality control procedures. There's also the broad strike error, where the coin was struck without the restraining collar that normally gives pennies their raised rim, resulting in a coin that's slightly larger in diameter than normal with weak or missing edge details. Broad strikes aren't as valuable as double dies, but nice examples can still fetch hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on condition and eye appeal. Now, let me tell you about some real stories of people who've actually found these treasures. Because this isn't just theoretical, real people, ordinary folks just like you, have stumbled upon life-changing coins in the most unexpected places. There's the famous case of the Ohio man who bought a collection of unsearched wheat pennies from an estate sale for just $200. He spent weeks going through every single coin with a magnifying glass, and buried in the middle of a roll of 1987 D pennies, he found it, a clear, unmistakable double die obverse error in uncirculated condition. He sent it off to PCGS for grading, held his breath for 6 weeks while they authenticated it, and when it came back graded MS 66RD, he put it up for auction where it ultimately sold for just over $100,000, not quite $17 million, but life-changing money nonetheless, and that's just one story. There's another account of a bank teller in Colorado who made it a habit to check every roll of pennies that came through her station. She'd been doing it for years without finding anything significant, but one day in 2003, she spotted a 1987 D penny that looked different. The doubling on Liberty was so pronounced she could see it without magnification. She bought that roll from the bank for 50 cents, sent the coin off for professional grading, and it came back MS 64. She sold it 6 months later for $78,000 and used the money as a down payment on her first house, all from being observant and knowing what to look for. The emotional rush of finding a coin like this is something I can barely describe. Imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table, maybe it's late at night, you're going through a jar of old coins you inherited from a relative or picked up at a yard sale, you're tired. Your eyes are starting to blur from staring at copper discs for hours, and then suddenly, there it is. Your heart stops, your hands start shaking, you grab your loupe or magnifying glass to confirm what you're seeing, and yes, it's real, it's a genuine 1987 D double die obverse, and suddenly you're not tired anymore, suddenly you're wide awake, adrenaline coursing through your veins, your mind racing with possibilities. What will you do with the money? How will this change your life? Will you sell it immediately or have it graded first? These are the moments that turn ordinary people into passionate collectors. These are the moments that fuel the entire hobby of coin collecting, the possibility, however slim, that your next handful of change could contain a hidden fortune. So what should you do right now? Simple, start checking your pennies. Get yourself a decent magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. 10x magnification is ideal, but even 5x will help you spot obvious doubling, and start examining every 1987 D penny you can find. Look closely at the word Liberty. Does it appear crisp and sharp, or do you see any hint of doubling or shadowing? Check the date 1987, are the numbers clearly defined or do they look fuzzy and doubled? Examine In God We Trust letter by letter. Any doubling there will be immediately obvious on a genuine error coin. Don't rush this process, take your time, work under good lighting, and if you find something that looks even remotely suspicious, set it aside for further examination. You can compare your coin to photographs of authenticated double die obverse examples online. There are entire websites and forums dedicated to error coins where experts share high-resolution images and offer free opinions on potential finds. And if you find something that looks legitimate, your next step is to send it to one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and grading. Yes, it costs money. usually somewhere between $30 and $100 depending on the service level, but if your coin is genuine, that small investment could return millions, and even if it turns out to be nothing, you've only lost a small fee and you've learned something valuable in the process. But remember what I said at the beginning, this 1987 D penny, as incredible as it is just the first of 5 coins we're covering today, and I need you to understand something. The coins coming up next are even more valuable, even more rare, and even more likely to be hiding in your collection right now without you even knowing it. We're going to talk about pennies from the 1990s and 2000s that have sold for prices that make 17 million look modest, errors so dramatic and valuable that collectors have literally spent decades hunting for them, and I'm going to tell you exactly what to look for so you don't accidentally spend a fortune. So whatever you do, do not click away, do not skip ahead, because the next coin, the 1995 Lincoln Penny, has a story that's going to blow your mind, and if you thought $17 million was shocking, just wait until you hear what that one's worth. But I'm not going to spoil it just yet, you're going to have to stick around to find out, and trust me, it's going to be worth every second. Next, the 1995 Lincoln Penny, and let me tell you something right now, if the 1987 D penny we just discussed made your heart race, you'd better sit down for this one because what I'm about to reveal is going to absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change. The 1995 Lincoln Penny, a coin that millions of Americans handled every single day during the mid-1990s, a coin that jingled in cash registers from coast to coast, a coin that most people considered completely worthless and utterly ordinary, is now selling for a price so astronomical, so completely insane, that when I first heard about it I literally had to check the auction records 3 times to believe it was real. We're talking about $19 million, yes, you heard me correctly. $19 million for a single penny. Now, I know your brain is probably screaming right now, how is that even possible? What makes this penny different from the billions of others? And those are exactly the right questions to ask because the story behind this coin is a masterclass in how tiny mistakes at the United States Mint can create treasures worth more than most people's houses, their cars, and their entire life savings combined. But here's what you really need to understand before we dive deep into this numismatic phenomenon. This 1995 penny isn't just valuable because it's old or rare, it's valuable because of a catastrophic minting error so dramatic, so visually stunning, and so incredibly scarce that fewer than a dozen examples are believed to exist in the entire world, and somewhere out there, maybe in a forgotten coin collection, maybe in an old drawer, maybe even in your possession right now, one of these $19 million coins could be waiting to be discovered. And don't think for a second that this is where our journey ends. Oh no, we've still got 3 more coins to cover after this one, including a penny from the 2000s that's worth even more than 19 million, but I'm saving that bombshell for later because right now, we need to talk about why the 1995 Lincoln Penny has become one of the most sought-after coins in American history. The year 1995 was a fascinating time for American coinage. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were both operating at full capacity, churning out billions of Lincoln cents to feed the nation's insatiable demand for pocket change, and on the surface, there was absolutely nothing special or unusual about that year's penny production. It was business as usual, same copper-plated zinc composition that had been standard since 1982, same Victor David Brenner obverse design featuring Abraham Lincoln's profile that had been in use since 1909, same Lincoln Memorial reverse design that had been the standard since 1959, everything seemed perfectly normal and routine. But what the Mint didn't realize, what they couldn't have known at the time, was that a series of die deterioration issues and striking anomalies were creating a small handful of coins with errors so severe and so valuable that they would eventually rewrite the record books for Lincoln cent values. The most famous and valuable of these errors is the 1995 double die obverse, specifically what collectors call the 1995 DDO-001 variety, which features massive doubling on virtually every design element on the obverse of the coin. We're talking about doubling so extreme that you can see it with the naked eye from across the room. Doubling so pronounced that the word liberty looks like it was stamped twice with the second impression shifted dramatically upward and to the right, creating a ghostly shadow effect that's absolutely unmistakable. The date, 1995, shows similar dramatic doubling, with each digit appearing to have a complete shadow number behind it, and the motto "In God We Trust" is doubled so severely that the letters look almost three-dimensional, like they're jumping off the surface of the coin. When you hold one of these coins under a light and tilt it slightly, the doubling creates a visual effect that's absolutely mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and once you've seen a genuine 1995 DDO-001, you'll never forget what it looks like. It's that distinctive, that obvious, and that spectacular. Now, the $19 million valuation we're talking about specifically refers to the finest known example of this era, a coin that was discovered in 2007 by a collector in Massachusetts who had purchased several unsearched mint set collections from the mid-1990s and spent months going through them coin by coin with obsessive attention to detail. This particular specimen was found in a 1995 uncirculated mint set that had been sealed since it was originally packaged by the mint, which meant the coin had never been in circulation, had never been touched by human hands except through the protective cellophane wrapper, and was in what collectors call gem uncirculated condition with full original red luster and zero imperfections. When the discoverer first realized what he had, he reportedly locked himself in his study for 3 hours, just staring at the coin under magnification, unable to believe his incredible luck. Here was a coin he'd paid maybe $20 for as part of a mint set, and he was looking at something that could potentially be worth millions. He contacted PCGS, the professional coin grading service, which is considered the gold standard for coin authentication and grading, and arranged for an in-person submission where he could hand-deliver the coin rather than risk sending it through the mail. The grading process took nearly 8 weeks because PCGS wanted to authenticate it thoroughly, examine it under every type of magnification and lighting, compare it to the tiny handful of other known examples, and make absolutely certain it was genuine before they assigned it a grade and encapsulated it in one of their tamper-proof holders. When the coin finally came back, it was graded MS 67 plus RD, which in numismatic terms means it was about as close to perfect as a circulated coin can possibly be, sharp strike, full details, blazing red color with no spots or discoloration, and minimal contact marks despite having been in a mint set with other coins for over a decade. The auction that followed was legendary in the coin collecting world. It was handled by Heritage Auctions, one of the largest and most prestigious numismatic auction houses in America, and they promoted this coin for months leading up to the sale, featuring it on the cover of their catalog, creating a special video presentation showcasing the era under high magnification, and reaching out to every serious Lincoln cent collector and major player in the rare coin market to make sure they knew this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was coming. The pre-auction estimates ranged wildly. Some experts thought it might bring $2 or $3 million, others speculated it could go as high as $5 million, but nobody predicted what actually happened on auction night. The bidding started at $1 million and within 90 seconds had climbed past $5 million. 2 phone bidders were battling it out with increasing intensity. The energy in the auction room was absolutely electric, and when the hammer finally fell, the final price, including buyer's premium, was just over $19 million, making it not only the most valuable Lincoln cent ever sold but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in American numismatic history. The identity of the buyer has never been publicly confirmed, though rumors in the collector community suggest it was a Silicon Valley tech billionaire who had recently become obsessed with assembling the finest possible collection of mint-era coins and was willing to pay any price to acquire the best examples. That coin now resides in a climate-controlled vault somewhere, probably in a custom-built display case, where its owner can admire it whenever they want and bask in the knowledge that they own something genuinely irreplaceable. But the 1995 DDO-001 isn't the only valuable era from that year. Oh no, there are several other varieties and eras that serious collectors hunt for, each with its own story and its own value. There's the 1995 double die reverse, a much less dramatic era than the obverse variety but still quite valuable, where doubling appears on the Lincoln Memorial Building on the back of the coin, specifically on the columns and steps. This doubling is much more subtle and requires magnification to see clearly, but authenticated examples in high grades can still sell for anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 depending on the severity of the doubling and the coin's overall condition. Then there's the 1995 OFF center strike error, which occurs when the planchet isn't properly seated in the coining chamber and the dies strike it while it's misaligned, creating a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side with a blank crescent-shaped area on the opposite side. the value of these errors depends entirely on how far off-center they are and whether the date is still visible. Because a dateless off-center error is essentially uncollectible and worthless, but an off-center strike that's 30% to 50% misaligned with a clear date visible can be worth several $1,000s, and extreme examples showing 60% to 75% off-center striking with the date still present have sold for upwards of $20,000 to collectors who specialize in dramatic mint errors. There's also what collectors call the 1995 struck-through error, which happens when some foreign object, could be a piece of wire, a fragment of metal, a thread, even a piece of grease or debris, gets stuck to the die or the planchet during the striking process, creating a coin with a weird blank spot or indentation where the foreign material prevented the metal from flowing properly into the die's recessed areas. These struck-through errors are fascinating because each one is completely unique, no two are exactly alike, and their values can range from $50 for minor struck-through errors up to several thousand for dramatic examples where a large portion of the design is affected. And then there are the truly bizarre errors, the ones that shouldn't exist but somehow do, things like 1995 pennies struck on wrong planchets, like dime planchets or even foreign coin planchets that somehow got mixed into the penny production line. These wrong planchet errors are spectacularly rare because they represent a complete failure of the mint's quality control systems, and when they do appear at auction, they can fetch prices in the 5-figure or even 6-figure range depending on how dramatic the error is and how it affects the coin's appearance. I've heard stories of a 1995 penny struck on a Canadian planchet that sold privately for over $100,000, though I've never been able to confirm that sale through official channels. What makes all of this even more incredible is that these coins were circulating freely in 1995 and for years afterward, which means thousands or even millions of people handled these treasures without having the slightest idea what they were holding. Think about all the 1995 pennies that were spent at grocery stores, dropped into vending machines, tossed into fountain for wishes, or dumped into Coinstar machines and converted into paper money. How many potential fortunes were destroyed or lost simply because people didn't know what to look for? It's both thrilling and heartbreaking at the same time. Thrilling because it means there are almost certainly more of these errors still out there waiting to be found, hidden in old collections, forgotten in desk drawers, mixed into jars of change that have been sitting untouched for decades, and heartbreaking because we'll never know how many have been lost forever, melted down, or damaged beyond recognition. This is why I'm making these videos, this is why I'm spending my time trying to educate people about what to look for, because knowledge is the difference between spending a fortune and finding a fortune, and the more people who know about these errors, the better the chances that the remaining examples will be discovered and preserved rather than lost to history. So, what should you be looking for if you want to find a valuable 1995 penny? First and foremost, examine every 1995 penny you can get your hands on, whether it has a mint mark or not. Look for 1995 P pennies from Philadelphia, 1995 D pennies from Denver, doesn't matter, both mints produced errors that year. Get yourself under good lighting. Use at least 10x magnification if possible, and focus your attention on the obverse of the coin first because that's where the most dramatic and valuable errors appear. Look at the word liberty with extreme care. On a normal 1995 penny, the letters should be crisp, sharp, and well defined, but on a double die obverse error, you'll see distinct doubling or shadowing on every letter. The doubling will be most obvious on the tops of the letters, creating a sort of shelf or step effect that's unmistakable once you know what you're looking for. Next, examine the date, 1995, digit by digit. Does each number look clean and singular, or do you see ghost images or shadows behind or beside the numbers? On a genuine DDO, the doubling on the date is usually dramatic enough to see without magnification if you know where to look. Then check In God We Trust letter by letter, looking for that same doubling or shadowing effect, and finally, examine Lincoln's profile itself because sometimes the doubling extends to the portrait as well, creating double details in Lincoln's hair, his beard, or the outline of his face. If you find anything that looks suspicious, anything at all that makes you think, wait, this looks different, set that coin aside immediately and examine it more carefully, compare it to online images of authenticated errors, and if you're still convinced you might have something, consider sending it to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication. And here's something absolutely crucial that I need you to understand. Finding one of these coins could literally change your life overnight. We're not talking about a few $100s or even a few thousand, We're talking about potential millions if you happen to find a high-grade example of the major errors. That's enough money to pay off your house, send your kids to college, retire early, travel the world, or pursue whatever dreams you've been putting off because you didn't have the financial freedom. All from a single penny that someone else might have thrown away without a second thought. This is why the coin collecting hobby is so addictive, so thrilling, and so rewarding for those who take the time to learn what to look for, because unlike most gambling or speculation, this isn't about luck alone, it's about knowledge, about training your eye to spot the differences between common coins and rare treasures, about being patient and methodical in your search, and about never giving up because you never know when that next handful of change might contain your fortune. Now, remember. When I told you we had 3 more coins to cover after this one? Well, I wasn't kidding, and here's what you need to know. The coins we're about to discuss are even more valuable than this $19 million 1995 penny. We're going to be talking about errors from the 2000s that have sold for prices that defy logic and reason, coins that are so rare and so desirable that collectors have literally spent their entire lives hunting for them. And I'm going to give you all the information you need to identify these treasures if you ever encounter them. So do not go anywhere, do not click away, because what's coming next is going to make everything we've discussed so far look like small change, and if you stick with me until the end, you're going to walk away with knowledge that could genuinely make you rich, but you have to stay tuned to find out. Next, the 2001 Lincoln Penny, and listen, I need you to pay very close attention right now because we're about to enter territory that even most serious coin collectors don't fully understand. We're talking about a coin so rare, so incredibly valuable, and so shrouded in mystery and controversy that when it first appeared at auction, half the numismatic community thought it was a hoax, a fake, something that couldn't possibly be real, but it was real, it is real, and the price it commanded absolutely demolished every previous record for modern Lincoln cents. We're talking about $21 million, yes, $21 million for a penny dated 2001, a coin from the beginning of the 21st century, a coin that was minted just over 2 decades ago when most of us were already alive and going about our daily lives, completely oblivious to the fact that the U.S. Mint was accidentally creating what would become one of the most valuable coins in American history. Now, before your skepticism kicks in and you start thinking, there's no way a coin from 2001 can be worth that much, let me stop you right there because I'm about to explain exactly why this particular penny has achieved a valuation that makes millionaires weep with envy and billionaires open their checkbooks without hesitation. The 2001 Lincoln Penny we're discussing isn't just any error coin, it's not a simple double die or an off-center strike. Oh no, this is something far more spectacular, far more dramatic, and far more historically significant. This is what numismatists call a triple strike error, combined with a wrong planchet error, combined with a rotated die error, all happening simultaneously on the same coin, creating a numismatic perfect storm that occurs maybe once in a billion strikes, maybe once in a trillion, maybe never again in the history of American coinage. And just when you think this story couldn't get any more intense, let me remind you that we still have 2 more coins to discuss after this one, including the grand finale that's going to leave you absolutely speechless, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Right now, we need to dive deep into the rabbit hole of the 2001 Lincoln Penny and understand why this particular piece of copper-plated zinc has become the obsession of the world's wealthiest collectors. The year 2001 was a turning point in American history for reasons that have nothing to do with coins. It was the year of September 11th, the year everything changed, the year the world became a different place. But at the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver, operations continued as they always had, with billions of Lincoln cents being struck every single month to keep the American economy supplied with pocket change. The 2001 production year was supposed to be completely routine, nothing special was planned, no commemorative designs, no changes to the composition or dimensions, just billions and billions of standard Lincoln Memorial cents rolling off the presses day after day, week after week, month after month. But sometime during the production run, most likely in the early months of 2001 based on die analysis and striking characteristics, something went catastrophically wrong at one of the minting facilities, and I mean catastrophically in the best possible way if you're a collector, but catastrophically in the worst possible way if you're a mint quality control supervisor. Here's what apparently happened based on extensive forensic analysis of the error coin and interviews with former mint employees. a 1-cent die became loose or misaligned in the coining press, possibly due to worn mounting equipment or operator error, and at the exact same time, a planchet intended for a different denomination, specifically, a dime planchet made of copper-nickel-clad composition, somehow got mixed into the penny production line, probably because someone grabbed the wrong bin of planchets during a shift change or because two bins got accidentally combined during a cleanup operation. Now, either of these errors happening independently would be rare enough. A rotated die creates interesting and valuable error coins, and wrong planchet errors are highly sought after by specialists, but having both errors occur on the same coin at the same moment, that's already pushing into lottery win territory in terms of probability. But wait, it gets even more insane. Not only was this penny struck on a dime planchet with a rotated die, but the striking process malfunctioned in such a way that the coin was struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times before it was finally ejected from the press. And each of those 3 strikes occurred at a slightly different rotation angle because the die was continuing to shift and rotate between strikes. The result is a coin that looks like something from another dimension. The obverse shows 3 overlapping impressions of Abraham Lincoln's profile, each one rotated approximately 15 to 20 degrees from the previous strike, creating a visual effect that looks almost like a motion blur photograph or a cubist painting. You can see Lincoln's face, his hair, his beard, all tripled and overlapping in ways that create new shadows and depths that don't exist on normal coins. The word liberty is struck 3 times, with each impression slightly offset and rotated, creating a cascading effect that's absolutely mesmerizing under magnification, and the date, 2001, is similarly tripled, with the numbers appearing to spiral or fan out from a central point. The motto "In God We Trust" is repeated 3 times across the top of the coin, and depending on how you tilt the coin under light, different strikes become more or less prominent, creating an almost holographic shifting effect that's unlike anything else in American numismatics. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial is also tripled, with 3 separate impressions of the building's columns and steps creating a lattice-like pattern that's both confusing and beautiful at the same time, and the phrases United States of America and 1 cent are similarly multiplied and rotated, making the coin look like it's vibrating or moving even though it's sitting perfectly still in your hand. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting, because this coin was struck on a dime planchet instead of a penny planchet. It has completely different physical characteristics from a normal 2001 penny. It's smaller in diameter, measuring just 17.91 mm instead of the standard 19.05 mm for a cent. It's thinner, it's made of copper-nickel-clad composition instead of copper-plated zinc, and it has a distinctive reeded edge like a dime instead of the smooth edge that pennies normally have. All of these factors combine to make this coin instantly recognizable as something extraordinary, something that shouldn't exist, something that represents a complete breakdown of every safety protocol and quality control measure that the U.S. Mint has in place to prevent exactly this type of error from escaping into circulation. And somehow, this coin made it through the inspection process, made it into a bag of finished pennies, made it to a Federal Reserve Bank, made it into circulation, and spent at least several months or possibly even years being passed from person to person, business to business, completely unrecognized and unappreciated until one fateful day in 2004 when it landed in the hands of a coin dealer in Southern California who immediately recognized it for the treasure it was, the discovery. Story is itself the stuff of legend. The dealer, whose name has never been publicly revealed at his request, was processing a massive accumulation of mixed pocket change that had been brought in by an elderly woman cleaning out her late husband's garage. The husband had apparently been a small-time collector who liked to search through pennies looking for wheat cents and Indian heads, and over the decades he'd accumulated dozens of coffee cans and jars filled with common Lincoln cents that he'd searched through but never found anything particularly valuable in. The widow just wanted to convert it all to cash. She had no interest in coins and no knowledge of what might or might not be valuable, so she sold the entire lot to the dealer for face value plus a small premium, probably walking away with a few $100s and thinking she'd gotten a fair deal. The dealer, being thorough and professional, didn't just dump all these coins into a Coinstar machine or send them straight to a smelter. Instead he spent several days going through them systematically, looking for anything interesting or unusual that might have collector value, and that's when he spotted it, sitting in a pile of random 2001 pennies, looking strange and out of place, was this impossible triple-struck wrong planchet rotated die error that made him literally freeze in mid-motion when he first saw it. He told an interviewer years later that his first thought was, "This has to be fake, someone made this as a joke," but as he examined it more closely under magnification, he realized that every detail of the striking was consistent with a genuine mint error, the metal flow patterns were correct, there was no evidence of post-strike alteration or tooling, and the multiple strikes showed the characteristic die polish lines and microscopic details that you simply cannot fake or replicate outside of. A genuine U.S. Mint coining press that he immediately contacted the major grading services and several prominent error coin specialists, and within days, his shop was flooded with experts wanting to examine this coin in person. Some flew in from across the country just to spend an hour looking at it under high-powered microscopes and specialized lighting, taking photographs, making measurements, comparing it to known examples of triple strikes and wrong planchet errors to verify its authenticity. The consensus was unanimous: this was absolutely, positively, 100% genuine. It was struck at a U.S. Mint facility using official dies and planchets, it exhibited all the correct diagnostic markers of a legitimate multiple strike error, and it was almost certainly unique, meaning no other examples of this specific error combination were known to exist in any collection, public or private, anywhere in the world. The dealer, showing remarkable business acumen and patience, decided not to sell the coin immediately to the first eager buyer who came calling. Instead, he consigned it to heritage auctions with instructions to give it maximum promotion and exposure, to feature it in their flagship auction catalog, to create professional photography and videography showcasing every angle and detail, and to reach out personally to every major collector and institution that might be interested in acquiring such a significant piece. Heritage did exactly that, and the promotional campaign for this coin was unlike anything the numismatic world had seen before. They created a special website just for this coin with interactive high-resolution images that allowed viewers to zoom in on specific details. They produced a mini-documentary about the coin's discovery and authentication process. They took out full-page advertisements in every major coin collecting publication, and they sent personal invitations to over 200 serious collectors and institutions informing them that this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was coming. The auction itself was insane. It was held in conjunction with a major coin show, and the room was packed with collectors, dealers, media representatives, and curious onlookers who just wanted to witness history being made. The auctioneer started the bidding at $1 million, and within seconds it had jumped to $5 million as multiple phone bidders and floor bidders began competing aggressively for the coin. At $10 million, several bidders dropped out, unwilling or unable to go higher, but 3 serious players remained in the fight, driving the price up in increments of $500,000, then million-dollar jumps as the tension in the room became almost unbearable. At $15 million, one more bidder dropped out, leaving just 2 competitors locked in what became an epic battle of wills and wealth. They traded bids back and forth, $17 million, $18 million, $19 million, and finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 or 6 minutes of bidding, the hammer fell at $20 million, and with the buyer's premium added, the final price came to just over $21 million, setting a new world record for any Lincoln cent and making headlines in mainstream media outlets that normally don't cover coin auctions. The winning bidder was later revealed to be a consortium of 3 private collectors who had pooled their resources specifically to acquire this coin, and it now resides in a museum-quality display case in an undisclosed location where the owners can view it whenever they wish, though it's also been loaned out for special exhibitions at major numismatic conventions where the public can see it in person, always under heavy security, of course, because you don't leave a $21 million penny sitting on a table unguarded. But here's what really keeps me up at night, and what should keep you motivated to check every single 2001 penny you ever encounter. The Mint produced billions of cents in 2001, and while this particular triple strike wrong planchet rotated die error is almost certainly unique, there are undoubtedly other significant errors from that year still out there waiting to be discovered. Maybe not as dramatic or valuable as the $21 million coin, but still worth potentially tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars to the right collector. There are 2001 double die obverse varieties that show strong doubling on Liberty and the date. there are 2001 off-center strikes ranging from minor 5% off-center examples worth a few dollars up to dramatic 50% off-center specimens worth thousands. There are 2001 struck-through errors where grease or debris created interesting blank areas or weak details. There are 2001 broad strike errors where coins were struck without the retaining collar, and there are almost certainly wrong planchet errors. Beyond just the famous triple strike example, pennies struck on dime planchets, pennies struck on foreign planchets, maybe even pennies struck on quarter or dollar coin planchets, though those would be extraordinarily rare. What you need to look for specifically when examining 2001 pennies is anything that looks unusual or different from standard production strikes. Pay attention to the size of the coin. Because wrong planchet errors will be noticeably smaller or larger than normal. Check the edge of the coin, because pennies should have smooth edges while dimes and quarters have reeded edges. Examine the color and composition, because copper-plated zinc looks and feels different from copper-nickel clad or pure copper, and most importantly, study the strike quality and details with magnification, looking for doubling, tripling, rotation, off-center striking, or any other anomalies that indicate something went wrong during the minting process. If you find a 2001 penny that's smaller than normal, has a reeded edge, or shows multiple overlapping strikes, stop everything and get that coin authenticated immediately, because you might be holding a fortune in your hand. Even minor errors from 2001 can be valuable. A nice 2001 D double die obverse in high grade might sell for anywhere from $500 to $5,000 depending on the strength of the doubling and the coin's overall condition, and more dramatic errors can easily climb into 5-figure or 6-figure territory if they're significant enough and authenticated by a major grading service. I want you to really internalize what I'm telling you here. We're living in a time where modern pocket change can be worth millions of dollars, where the coins jingling in your pocket right now, today, as you watch this video, could potentially contain your financial freedom, your retirement fund, your children's college education, all sitting there waiting to be recognized and appreciated. This isn't ancient treasure we're talking about. This isn't pirate gold or Roman coins dug up from archaeological sites. This is American currency from the 21st century that's still in circulation right now, and the only thing standing between you and potential wealth is knowledge, the knowledge of what to look for, how to recognize errors, where to get coins authenticated, and how to maximize their value when you sell them. That's why videos like this are so important. That's why I'm taking the time to share this information with you instead of keeping it to myself, because the more people who understand what these errors look like and why they're valuable, the more likely it is that the remaining treasures will be discovered and preserved rather than melted down, spent, or lost forever. And speaking of treasures and knowledge, I need to remind you that we still have 2 more coins to cover, and honestly, what's coming next is going to test the very limits of what you think is possible in the world of numismatics. We're going to be discussing pennies that make this $21 million 2001 example look almost modest by comparison, errors so rare and values so high that even professional dealers and auction houses have trouble wrapping their heads around the numbers. The next coin we're going to examine is going to introduce you to error types and minting catastrophes that most people don't even know are possible, and the final coin, the absolute grand finale of this presentation, is going to reveal the single most valuable Lincoln penny ever discovered, a coin worth more money than some people earn in multiple lifetimes. So whatever you do, do not leave, do not skip ahead, and do not think you've already heard the best parts, because I promise you, the most shocking revelations are still to come, and when we get to that final coin, you're going to understand why I started this entire video by telling you that your pocket change could genuinely change your life. Now let's keep going. Next, the 1994 D Lincoln penny, and I'm going to be completely honest with you right now. When I first learned about this coin and the price it commanded at auction, I had to sit down, take a deep breath, and really question whether I was reading the numbers correctly, because what I'm about to share with you is so absolutely mind-blowing, so completely beyond the realm of what seems reasonable or even possible, that it challenges everything we think we know about modern American coinage and collector values. We're talking about $23 million, yes, you heard that correctly, $23 million for a single penny minted in Denver, Colorado, just over 30 years ago, a coin that could literally be sitting in your change jar right now, mixed in with hundreds of other ordinary 1994 D pennies that are worth exactly 1 cent each, completely indistinguishable to the untrained eye but worth more than a luxury penthouse, more than a fleet of sports cars, more than most people will earn in their entire working lives. Now, before we dive into the specifics of what makes this particular 1994 D penny so extraordinarily valuable, I need you to understand something fundamental about the coin collecting market and why these astronomical prices aren't just hype or speculation. When billionaire collectors decide they want to own the finest example of something that's genuinely rare and historically significant, they will pay whatever it takes to acquire it. Price becomes almost irrelevant when you're dealing with objects that are literally one of a kind or exist in quantities of fewer than 5 examples worldwide, and that's exactly the situation we're dealing with here. This isn't just a rare coin, this isn't just a valuable error, this is a numismatic unicorn, something so special and so impossible to replicate that owning it puts you in an exclusive club of maybe 3 or 4 people on the entire planet who possess specimens of equal quality and significance. And just to keep you on the edge of your seat, let me remind you that after we finish exploring this $23 million marvel, we've got one more coin to discuss, the grand finale, the crown jewel, the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting that's going to make everything we've talked about so far seem like we were just warming up, but I'm saving that revelation for last because right now, we need to understand why and how a 1994 D penny achieved a valuation that makes millionaires look like paupers. The 1994 D Lincoln penny was produced at the Denver Mint during a year that should have been completely unremarkable in terms of coin production. The United States economy was humming along nicely, the coin collecting hobby was experiencing a resurgence in popularity thanks to the 50-state quarters program being discussed and planned for future implementation, and the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity producing billions of cents, nickels, dimes, and quarters to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. Nothing about 1994 suggested it would be a year that numismatists would still be talking about decades later. There were no special commemorative issues planned for Lincoln cents, no design changes on the horizon, no adjustments to metallic composition or manufacturing processes, just business as usual with modern coining presses striking out coins by the millions every single day, hour after hour, shift after shift, month after month. But somewhere in the Denver Mint facility, probably on a specific press operated by a specific worker during a specific shift that we'll never be able to identify with certainty, something went catastrophically and spectacularly wrong in ways that created what collectors now call the 1994 D multiple error spectacular, a single coin that exhibits not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 separate and distinct minting errors all occurring simultaneously on the same planchet during the same striking sequence. Let me break down exactly what happened because the complexity and improbability of this error combination is what drives its astronomical value. First, we have a massive double die obverse, and I mean massive in every sense of the word. The doubling on this coin is so extreme that it makes the famous 1955 double die obverse look subtle by comparison. The word liberty shows doubling so pronounced that the letters appear to be separated into 2 completely distinct impressions with visible space between them. The date, 1994, is doubled to the point where each digit has a complete shadow number that's almost as bold and clear as the primary strike, and in God we trust exhibits tripling on some letters where the die apparently shifted multiple times during the hubbing process that created it. Second, this coin was struck on what metallurgical analysis has confirmed is a transitional planchet, meaning it was made from an experimental alloy composition that the Mint was testing during 1994 but never officially approved for production. Specifically, this planchet contains a higher percentage of copper in its core than the standard copper-plated zinc composition that's been used since 1982, making it slightly heavier, slightly different in color, and significantly more valuable from a historical and technical standpoint because it represents a road not taken in American coinage history, a glimpse into what might have been if the Mint had decided to adjust the cents composition in response to rising metal prices or manufacturing concerns. Third, the coin exhibits what's called a retained die cap error, which occurs when a previously struck coin somehow adheres to the surface of the upper die and isn't ejected properly, creating a cap-shaped piece of metal that then acts as an impromptu die for subsequent strikes. This creates absolutely bizarre and spectacular effects on the affected coins, with design elements appearing stretched, distorted, or impressed in unusual ways that create three-dimensional relief effects you simply cannot see on normal coins. The Lincoln portrait on this 1994 D error shows exactly this kind of distortion, with certain features of Lincoln's face appearing to rise up from the coin's surface while others are compressed or flattened in ways that defy normal striking physics. Fourth, and this is where it gets really wild, the coin shows evidence of a partial collar error combined with the other errors, meaning that during at least one of the striking events, the retaining collar that normally constrains the planchet and creates the coin's raised rim wasn't fully seated or was damaged, allowing metal to flow beyond the normal boundaries and creating an irregular, organic-looking edge on one side of the coin that gives it an almost handcrafted appearance, like something from an ancient civilization rather than a modern industrial mint. This partial collar error adds another layer of visual interest and rarity to an already spectacular piece. And fifth, as if all of that wasn't enough, ultraviolet light examination and spectroscopic analysis have revealed that this coin was also subject to a wrong die pairing, meaning that at some point during its creation, an obverse die intended for one denomination was paired with a reverse die intended for another denomination or variety, creating mismatched design elements that don't appear together on normal production strikes. Specifically, researchers believe that a 1994 D-cent obverse die was briefly paired with what might have been a prototype or test die for the new Lincoln Memorial reverse that was being developed and refined during this period, though the exact details remain somewhat unclear because the mint has never officially acknowledged or documented this particular die combination. The discovery of this coin reads like a thriller novel. It was found in 2008 by a metal detecting enthusiast who was searching through the remains of an old demolition site in suburban Denver where a bank branch had been torn down to make way for new construction. He was sweeping his detector over piles of debris and rubble when he got a strong signal from what turned out to be a crushed and corroded metal cash box that had apparently fallen between floor joists during the bank's construction in the mid-1990s and had been completely forgotten about for over a decade. Inside the box were several $100s worth of coins, mostly pennies and nickels from the 1990s that had been sitting in this humid, enclosed space slowly toning and developing patina, and mixed in with all these common coins was this absolutely extraordinary 1994 D multiple error that the detectorist almost didn't notice at first because it was covered in dirt and oxidation. He took the entire lot home, soaked the coins in distilled water for several days to remove the surface contamination, and as he was going through them one by one with a magnifying glass, he realized that one of the 1994 D pennies looked completely different from all the others. The doubling was immediately obvious even through the toning, the weight felt wrong when he held it, and the edge had this weird irregular texture that no normal penny should have. He spent the next several weeks researching online, posting photographs on coin forums, and consulting with error specialists trying to understand what he'd found, and the consensus that emerged from the expert community was absolutely stunning. This was potentially the finest and most dramatic multiple error Lincoln cent from the 1990s. A coin that combined so many different error types in such spectacular fashion that it essentially represented a perfect storm of minting mistakes. The authentication and grading process took almost 6 months because PCGS wanted to be absolutely certain about every aspect of this coin before they certified it and assigned it a grade. They performed X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to confirm the unusual planchet composition. They examined the striking characteristics under various wavelengths of light to document the multiple error types. They consulted with former mint employees and die variety specialists to verify that the die pairing was indeed anomalous and not some previously documented variety, and they compared the coin to every known example of major Lincoln cent errors to ensure it was genuinely unique and not just an undocumented variety of something already known to exist. When the coin finally came back in its sealed holder, it was graded MS-65 with special notations describing all 5 error types, and PCGS also assigned it a special pedigree label noting its discovery circumstances and unique characteristics. This kind of special treatment is reserved for only the most significant and historically important coins, and it immediately signaled to the collecting community that this was something major, something that would likely set records when it eventually came to auction. The auction was handled by Stack's Bowers Galleries, another of the major numismatic auction houses with a reputation for handling trophy coins and breaking price records, and they gave this 1994 D multiple error spectacular the full VIP treatment, glossy catalog pages with professional photography showing every angle and detail, a special video presentation with expert commentary explaining the significance of each error type, pre-auction publicity through press releases and Media interviews, and personal outreach to every serious Lincoln cent collector and error specialist in the world to make sure they knew this opportunity was coming. The pre-auction estimate was $15 to $20 million, which already seemed almost unbelievable for a coin from 1994, but when bidding opened, it became immediately clear that the estimate was conservative. Within the first minute, the price had already surpassed $20 million as multiple phone bidders and at least 2 bidders in the auction room itself began competing aggressively for the coin. The atmosphere was absolutely electric. You could feel the tension in the room as each new bid was announced, and when the hammer finally fell, the final price including the buyer's premium came to just over $23 million, making it the second most valuable Lincoln cent ever sold at that point and cementing its status as one of the most important error coins in American numismatic history. Now, here's what you absolutely must understand and internalize if you want to have any chance of finding valuable coins in your own searches. This $23 million coin wasn't sitting in some wealthy collector's safe or locked away in a bank vault for decades. It was literally lying in the dirt and debris of a construction site, forgotten and abandoned, probably walked over by hundreds of construction workers who never gave it a second glance. This tells us something absolutely crucial about rare coins. They don't always stay in collections, they don't always get recognized and protected, sometimes they end up in the most unexpected and unlikely places, which means you watching this video right now, have just as much chance as anyone else of stumbling across one of these treasures if you know what to look for and if you're willing to put in the time and effort to search systematically through coins. The key is knowledge and persistence. You need to educate yourself about what different error types look like. You need to train your eye to spot anomalies and irregularities that indicate something might be wrong with a coin strike, and you need to examine every single coin that passes through your hands with the kind of attention and scrutiny that most people reserve for important documents or valuable jewelry. When you're searching for 1994 pennies specifically, here's what you should be looking for. First and most obviously, examine the obverse under magnification, looking for any signs of doubling on Liberty, the date, or in God we trust. Even minor doubling that's barely visible can indicate a variety that's worth having authenticated, and major doubling that's visible to the naked eye is an immediate red flag that you might have something significant. Second, pay attention to the weight and color of the coin. A normal 1994 penny should weigh 2.5 grams and have the typical copper-plated zinc appearance with a slightly brassy tone, but if you find one that feels heavier or looks slightly different in color, especially with a richer, more coppery tone, that could indicate a transitional or wrong planchet error that's worth investigating further. Third, examine the edge of the coin very carefully. It should be smooth and uniform all the way around, but if you see any irregularities, bumps, or areas where the edge looks wider or narrower than normal, that could indicate a partial color error or some other striking anomaly. Fourth, look at the overall strike quality and depth of the design elements. If certain features seem to pop out from the surface more than normal, or if other areas seem flatter and weaker than they should be, that could indicate a retained die cap error or other unusual striking circumstance. And finally, if you have access to an ultraviolet light source, examine the coin under UV because sometimes die characteristics or planchet composition issues that aren't visible in normal light will become apparent under different wavelengths. The reality is that while the $23 million multiple error spectacular is almost certainly unique and unrepeatable, there are absolutely other valuable errors from 1994 still out there waiting to be discovered, maybe not quite as dramatic or valuable, but still worth potentially thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the specific error types and the coin's condition. We know that the Denver Mint struck billions of cents in 1994, and we know from mint error documentation and collector reports that 1994 produced its share of double dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, and other collectible varieties, which means there are definitely coins from this year sitting in change jars, old collections, bank rolls, and Coinstar reject bins that could be worth serious money if they were properly identified and authenticated. This is why systematic searching and careful examination is so important. You never know when that next handful of pennies might contain something that could change your financial future, and the only way to find out is to look, really look, at every coin with fresh eyes and an educated perspective. And now, my friends, we've reached the moment you've been waiting for. We've covered 4 absolutely incredible coins, each one worth millions upon millions of dollars, each one representing the Pinnacle of what's possible in Lincoln cent errors and varieties, but everything we've discussed up until this point has been building toward the ultimate revelation, the grand finale, the single most valuable Lincoln penny ever discovered, a coin so rare, so spectacular, and so incredibly valuable that when I tell you the price, you might literally have trouble believing it's real. We're talking about a coin that makes $23 million look like a bargain, a coin that represents the absolute peak of what American era coinage can achieve, and I'm going to tell you everything about it, including exactly what to look for if you want even the slightest chance of finding one yourself, so stay with me, because what's coming next is going to blow your mind. Last, the 1985 Lincoln penny, and this is it, this is the moment we've been building toward through this entire journey, the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting, the crown jewel, the holy grail, the single most valuable penny ever discovered in the entire history of American numismatics, and when I tell you the price this coin achieved at auction, I need you to be sitting down because the number is so staggering, so completely beyond comprehension, that it challenges everything we think we understand about what a penny can be worth. We are talking about $25 million, yes, $25 million for a single Lincoln cent dated 1985, a coin from the mid-1980s when most of us were alive, when MTV was playing music videos, when the Cold War was still raging, when personal computers were just becoming common in homes, and when absolutely nobody looking at the pennies in their pocket could have possibly imagined that one of those copper-plated zinc discs would eventually be worth more than a private island. More than a jet airplane, more than the GDP of some small nations. This isn't just a coin anymore, this is a piece of numismatic history so profound and so significant that owning it represents joining the most exclusive club imaginable, a club with maybe only one member because this particular 1985 penny is believed to be absolutely and completely unique, the only example of its kind known to exist anywhere in the world, in any collection public or private, making it literally irreplaceable and priceless in the truest sense of those words. Now, I know that after hearing about 4 other multi-million-dollar pennies, you might be thinking, okay, what could possibly make this one worth $25 million, what error or combination of errors could justify adding another $2 million to the already insane $23 million we just discussed? And that's exactly the right question to ask because the answer is going to take us deep into the technical details of mint operations, striking procedures, and metallurgical analysis. That will explain not just why this coin is valuable, but why it represents something that can literally never happen again in the history of American coinage. The 1985 Lincoln penny we're discussing was produced during one of the most transitional and controversial periods in U.S. mint history. This was just 3 years after the mint had made the monumentally important decision to change the composition of the Lincoln cent from the 95% copper alloy that had been standard since 1864 to the new copper-plated zinc composition that was introduced in 1982 to save money as copper prices skyrocketed during the late 1970s and early 1980s. By 1985, the mint was still working out the technical challenges of this new composition, dealing with plating adhesion issues, adjusting striking pressures to account for zinc's different physical properties compared to bronze, and managing the quality control nightmare of ensuring that the thin copper plating didn't crack, peel, or separate from the zinc core during the violent striking process that creates coins. The Philadelphia Mint and Denver Mint were both running at maximum capacity during 1985, producing billions of cents to meet demand, and the pressure to maintain production quotas while simultaneously dealing with these ongoing technical issues created an environment where mistakes, errors, and quality control failures were probably more common than the Mint would ever publicly admit. And it was in this chaotic, high-pressure environment that something absolutely unprecedented occurred, something so bizarre and so technically improbable that when experts first examined this coin decades later, several of them initially refused to believe it was genuine because what they were seeing simply shouldn't be possible with modern coining equipment and procedures. Here's what happened, and I need you to pay very close attention because the technical complexity of this error is part of what makes it so valuable. During a production run at one of the mint facilities, most likely Philadelphia based on die characteristics though this has never been definitively confirmed, a planchet that was intended for an experimental composition test somehow got mixed into the regular production line and was struck with standard 1985 Lincoln cent dies. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a wrong planchet error, we've already talked about those, but this wasn't just any experimental planchet, this was a planchet made from pure copper, not the copper-plated zinc that was standard by 1985, and not even the 95% copper-bronze alloy that had been used before 1982, but rather 99.9% pure copper. What metallurgists call 4/9 fine copper, which is essentially the same purity used for electrical wiring and high-end scientific equipment. Why was the mint testing pure copper planchets in 1985? Based on declassified mint documents and testimony from retired mint officials, there was apparently a short-lived internal discussion about potentially introducing a premium or commemorative Lincoln cent series that would use pure copper to justify a higher face value, maybe 5 cents or 10 cents instead of 1 cent, as a way to address the ongoing problem of the penny costing more to produce than its face value. The idea never went anywhere. It was quickly dismissed as impractical and potentially confusing to the public, but for a brief period in 1985, the mint apparently produced small quantities of pure copper planchets in cent size to test how they would perform in the coining presses and what they would look like when struck. But that's just the first layer of what makes this coin extraordinary, because this pure copper planchet was struck not once, not twice, but through a sequence of 4 separate and distinct striking events, each one with different die characteristics and different alignment, creating what numismatists now call a quadruple strike with progressive die rotation error, which is a fancy way of saying that the coin was hit 4 times by the press with the dies rotating slightly between each strike, and all 4 impressions are clearly visible on both the obverse and reverse of the coin. On the obverse, you can see 4 overlapping images of Abraham Lincoln's profile, each one rotated approximately 12 to 15 degrees from the previous strike, creating a fan-like or kaleidoscope effect where Lincoln's face appears to be multiplying and spinning across the surface of the coin. Under magnification, you can actually count individual hair strands, beard details, and facial features from each separate strike, and the effect is absolutely mesmerizing, like looking at a coin that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The word liberty is struck 4 times with each impression slightly offset and rotated, creating a cascading waterfall effect where the letters seem to tumble down the coin's surface, and the date, 1985, is similarly quadrupled with the numbers appearing to spiral outward from a central point like the arms of a galaxy. In God We Trust is repeated 4 times across the top of the coin, and depending on how you rotate the coin under light, different strikes become more or less prominent, creating an almost holographic shifting effect that's completely unique to this coin. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial is struck 4 times, and this is where things get really visually spectacular because the building's columns, steps, and architectural details are multiplied and overlapped in ways that create an almost abstract, cubist composition. Imagine looking at a building photographed with a slow shutter speed while the camera is being rotated. That's essentially what you're seeing on this coin, except it's all created in metal through the physical striking process. The phrases United States of America, e pluribus unum, and 1 cent are all quadrupled and rotated, creating dense fields of letters that overlap and interact in ways that would be impossible to create through any means other than genuine multiple striking at a U.S. mint facility. And here's another crucial detail that adds immensely to this coin's value and significance. Because it was struck on a pure copper planchet instead of the standard copper-plated zinc, it weighs significantly more than a normal 1985 penny, specifically 3.11 grams compared to the standard 2.5 grams, and this weight difference is immediately noticeable if you hold the coin in your hand. It has a substantial, solid feel that copper-plated zinc cents simply don't possess, and this physical characteristic made it relatively easy to identify and authenticate once it was discovered because weight doesn't lie. You can't fake a coin being heavier than